My name is Sergeant David Willis. I'm 42 years old and I've been serving in the United States Army for 19 years. I didn't join out of some grand dream or family legacy. I signed up at 23 because I needed direction, and the Army offered structure, purpose, and a steady paycheck. Turns out, it also gave me something else. A sense of belonging, even if most days I was invisible. I'm not the kind of soldier you see in recruitment ads. I don't jump out of planes or carry sniper rifles. My job's quieter than that. I work in logistics, supply chains, vendor contracts, systems maintenance, the stuff nobody thinks about unless it breaks. You've got guys kicking down doors and flying Black Hawks, but none of it happens if someone doesn't make sure the parts arrive, the software runs, the fuel gets where it needs to go. That someone's usually me. Or at least, it used to be. Most of my career, I stayed out of sight. I learned to be the guy who kept everything running without making noise about it. I made the spreadsheets work. I caught the errors before they turned into delays. I negotiated with contractors who didn't even know my rank, just that when I called, things moved. I wore the same boots every day until they fell apart and patched systems together long after the manuals said they were obsolete. I didn't ask for medals. I just wanted the machine to work. But when you spend years being quiet, people stop hearing you. They start to think the system runs on its own, that logistics just happens. And when it doesn't, they look around confused, wondering why the parts aren't where they should be, or why a system that never failed suddenly won't turn on. That's where I'm at now, calm on the surface, steady like always, but carrying the weight of 1,000 unnoticed fixes and a system I built to keep them safe. I've never raised my voice in a meeting, never needed to. The work always spoke for itself, until they stopped listening. I walked into that conference room thinking it would be another round of logistics updates, maybe supply audits, maybe another briefing about procurement timelines or digital reporting protocols. Nothing unusual. I even had my notepad open, pen ready. That's how routine it felt. The room was quiet, cold even. Just one man waiting, Lieutenant Kevin Dwyer, young, sharply dressed, shoes too clean. The kind of officer who always read from scripts like he was practicing for a promotion board. He didn't look up right away, just nodded once, then started reading. Said my name like it was just another line item. Informed me, with absolutely no emotion, that I was being reassigned. Effective immediately. Stripped of my command authority over logistics execution. Replaced by a junior civilian contractor team. No context. No prior warning. No performance review. Just a formality delivered like a weather report. I sat there, unsure if I'd heard it right. He continued, still calm, talking about shifting operational priorities. Said the Army was streamlining roles. I wasn't terminated. Just being moved to a back-end role, base side, low visibility, technical liaison to supply intake. Said it like he expected me to thank him. Then he handed me a folder and told me to report to Storage Bay 3 the next morning. I asked once if this was due to a policy violation. He shook his head. Said it was part of a wider realignment. But his eyes didn't meet mine. He couldn't even fake respect. It was like I'd already been erased. 19 years, and he couldn't offer a straight answer. There was a long pause after he spoke, the kind that fills a room like smoke. I didn't speak right away. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. Just nodded once and stood. The silence said more than I ever could. Dwyer didn't look back up, just went back to his screen like I was a spreadsheet that had already been closed. I walked out with the folder still in my hand. No salute, no handshake, just a mechanical pivot into the hallway and the sound of my own boots. The corridor was empty. The base always felt small, but in that moment, it felt cavernous. Like I'd been cut off from something invisible, not fired, not disciplined, just reassigned. Like my years of service had been converted into a line on a chart and moved with a drag and drop. By the time I reached the lot, I hadn't said a word. Not to the admin sergeant at the desk, not to the 2 privates passing by. I didn't trust my voice to come out steady. Not yet. I sat in my car for a full minute before starting it. watched the sun hit the hood and tried to let the air in. It wasn't the reassignment that cut the deepest. It was how cleanly it was done. No one stopped me. No one asked questions. And the worst part? Some part of me knew it was coming. I just never expected it to feel like this. I didn't say a word. Just stood up, nodded once, and walked out with the folder still sealed in my hand. The hallway was colder than I remembered, lights too bright. The echo of my boots, the only sound that followed me. I passed the operations wing first. Rooms I had spent months inside, fixing systems, running numbers, writing the same policies that kept the place from buckling. Now, the doors were shut, conversations happening without me. Nobody looked up, not even Specialist Harris, who used to call me every time the supply software froze. He didn't see me walk by, or he pretended not to. At the HR desk, I placed my badge on the tray. The admin sergeant didn't lift her head. The tray was half full. Like I was just another name being rotated out. I waited for someone to speak. No one did. A junior tech glanced up once, then back at his screen. That was it. I walked past the maintenance wing, past the supply cage where I once helped design the intake protocols, past the requisition lockers I installed after hours. None of it mattered now. I had been pulled from the map, quietly, efficiently, and no one even noticed the shift. It should have hurt more, but it didn't, not like I expected. What I felt was colder, cleaner, like a wire had snapped loose and everything went still. That's when I knew I wasn't angry. I was done. Outside, the air was dry, the sun high. I crossed the lot and reached my truck without looking back. Sat down. Let the heat from the windshield warm my face. My phone buzzed once. I didn't check it. Just watched the clouds move. They thought they'd moved a piece off the board. But they'd forgotten something. I had written most of the operating structure that still held this place together. Not on paper, not just in policy, but in the backbone of every vendor system they used. And I hadn't signed everything over. I didn't need to fight back. I didn't need to plead or prove anything. The system would speak on its own. Eventually, all I had to do was step out of the way and wait. A few years back, Command asked me to draft a policy for vendor management. Nothing flashy, just a continuity protocol in case someone dropped the ball during transitions. They wanted structure. I gave them structure. A full operating document that covered every angle. Renewal cycles, signature responsibilities, escalation thresholds. Buried in the middle, under Section 6, was Clause Delta 7. It stated clearly that any logistical contract exceeding 30 days in duration required dual authorization. One from base command, one from the designated operations controller. That second name was mine. Not a title. A signature. Legally filed, archived, and notarized. I didn't hide it. I submitted it through all the proper channels. Legal reviewed it. Command signed off. Nobody blinked. They saw it as a formality. I saw it as protection. The kind of thing you put in place not for today, but for the day when no one's paying attention. They never replaced me in the system, never updated the file, never named a new controller. So every system tied to that policy still checked for my authorization. Every vendor portal, every renewal script, every automated handshake, it all pointed back to me. They thought walking me out ended the story. But they forgot something. I wasn't just part of the process. I was written into the foundation. My name wasn't erased because they never thought to erase it. And the system, unlike the people in charge, doesn't forget. At first, it didn't mean much. Just a quiet detail buried in the back end. But I knew better. I knew what happened when renewal season came, when licenses expired, when access tokens needed a reset. The software would reach for a signature and find no one. I wasn't angry, not even satisfied, just still, like I had set a trap years ago and finally heard the click. It wasn't sabotage. It was policy. Their policy. They signed it. They enforced it. They just never understood it. And now, piece by piece, It was about to pull the floor out from under them. Back at home, I powered up my old personal laptop, the one I used to draft most of the initial frameworks. It groaned like it hadn't been touched in months, but it still ran. I opened the local backups and scrolled through the policy folders until I found the master continuity file. Clause Delta 7 was still there. Clean, precise, untouched. The language hadn't changed. It required both command and operations controller sign-off for any critical vendor action. Without it, the system was programmed to halt the process. No signature match, no execution. It wasn't a security flaw, it was compliance. Reviewed, tested, approved by legal. I didn't sneak it in. I engineered it out loud. Every major vendor platform was tied into that logic. I'd helped connect the endpoints, build the token sequences, draft the enforcement triggers. It was all above board. They just didn't understand what they'd built, or who they'd made a part of it. The enforcement was automatic. No administrator could override it, no temporary bypass, no backdoor. The system looked for two keys. If only one turned, the lock stayed shut. Simple, effective, quiet, exactly what it was meant to be. I checked the timestamps. Nothing had been altered. My credentials were still listed as active in the continuity matrix. Not externally visible, but embedded deep in the system rules. I hadn't logged in since I left. Didn't need to. The machine didn't care if I was gone. It only cared about protocol. That's the part no one thinks about. We build these systems to make things faster, cleaner, safer. But if you don't respect what's under the hood, they can shut you down just as quickly. Clause Delta 7 wasn't revenge. It wasn't sabotage. It was insulation. For the base, for the process, and maybe, a little bit, for me. As I closed the file, I could already picture what would happen next. One renewal would fail, then two. Confused emails, silent calls. Eyes darting through policy stacks no one had touched in years. And somewhere, someone would realize they were missing a signature. Mine. It began like a hiccup in the system. A vendor contract for fuel transport didn't renew. The alert went unnoticed at first. Some junior admin figured it was a clerical error and kicked it up the chain. By mid-morning, the second glitch landed. A routine logistics delivery rations for a remote field unit was flagged as unverified. The system rejected the confirmation because the second sign-off wasn't there. Then came the access requests. Procurement tried to push a new requisition through the automated portal. It stalled at submission. The API keys had expired. No validation, no push. The help desk started logging tickets. Confused users. Error messages they hadn't seen before. By the time someone from IT got involved, the thread had tripled in length. Nothing made sense. They rebooted the servers, restarted the pipeline schedulers, cleared the caches. But the approvals were still locked. By noon, half the supply chain was stalled. Nothing catastrophic yet. But the wheels had started to jam. The system was working exactly as it was designed to. No dual signature, no progress. Simple. Someone flagged operations, then compliance, then command. They held an emergency meeting, tried to trace the issue upstream. Where was the breakdown? Who had last authorized a vendor renewal? They pulled audit logs, access trails, signatory histories, and ran straight into Delta 7. My name popped up in the most unexpected place. Not in a profile, not in the main directory, but embedded in the logic engine, hard-coded, time-stamped, and validated. There was no override function. I'd made sure of that. It was a safeguard, a requirement for accountability, built to protect the base from unilateral errors. But now, that protection had become a wall. Someone tried to reauthorize a vendor manually. The system bounced it, missing signatory. Invalid command. The auto-response pointed straight back to the continuity clause. Section Delta 7, paragraph B, required dual authentication not present. The silence after that was louder than any siren. I didn't call anyone, didn't send a message. I just watched the chain reaction from my living room. One system after another pausing like a skipped record. Procurement halted. Dispatch froze. Field requests timed out. No one knew where the problem started, only that the machine had stopped listening. I imagined the panic building in those conference rooms. Commanders flipping through binders, lawyers scrambling through old email threads, and somewhere, someone whispering my name like it had weight again. The thing about good systems is they remember. They don't forget because someone got demoted or walked out without a fight. They follow the rules. Every time, and this time, the rule they ignored was the one I wrote. It started on a Tuesday morning. A vendor rep logged into the secure portal and found the renewal button grayed out. No signature, no access. He flagged it to procurement. Procurement called IT. IT shrugged and blamed a sync issue. But behind the curtain, Clause Delta 7 had already spoken. By noon, another vendor reported the same error. Supplies stalled. Tools locked out. Requisitions bounced. Someone tried to override the system but got a rejection notice quoting policy. It didn't say my name. It didn't have to. Clause Delta 7 was enough. At 1,400 hours, a high-level logistics call was underway. Base leadership, regional command, contract officers. Half the supply chain depended on that renewal. When the vendor asked who the second signatory was, the room went still. Someone from legal scrambled through PDFs. Another officer flipped through binders like the answer might slip out. The vendor wasn't budging. No signature, no service. Clause Delta 7. Signed, active, binding. They read it out loud, slow, like hearing it would undo it. The colonel in charge didn't yell. He didn't need to. His silence said more than words. You could hear the tension press down. A base running fine one day, and ice the next. All because they forgot the man behind the system. One major tried to suggest a workaround. The compliance officer cut him off. It was built into the system logic. No override key, no failsafe. It had passed every review, every audit. Approved years ago. Filed. Forgotten. Now, it wasn't just policy. It was law, their signatures, and it had teeth. I wasn't there. I didn't have to be. That's the beauty of systems that respect rules. They don't blink, they don't panic, they just enforce. From what I heard, no one even brought up my name at first. Too proud, too scared, or maybe they really didn't remember. But the clause remembered, and that was enough. The messages started pouring in by the second morning. First, it was a couple of vendor emails flagged urgent, then a few missed calls from base numbers I recognized but hadn't saved. By noon, I was watching my screen light up like a warning beacon, but I didn't move. I sat at my kitchen table, same coffee mug from the day before, hands wrapped around the warmth like it was holding me together. Each ping was louder than the last, but I just kept sipping, eyes on the window, not the screen. I wasn't angry. I wasn't gloating. I was just done. They didn't see me when I was there, but now that things had stopped working, they were scrambling. Funny how that works. I hadn't touched a thing. The system was just doing what I built it to do. It didn't forget me even if they did. My phone buzzed again. Another call. No voicemail. No apology. Just desperation in missed rings and unsent words. I let it all slide past, like wind over stone. In that silence, I felt something settle. Not revenge, not triumph, just clarity. The kind you only get after carrying a weight for years no one else could see. They didn't fire a man, they tried to erase a foundation, and now they were watching it vanish, piece by piece. The envelope arrived on a quiet morning. No return address, but I recognized the seal. Military issue. Heavy paper. Crisp fold. Someone had taken their time. I held it in my hand for a while. Let the weight settle. Then I set it down on the kitchen table without opening it. I already knew what was inside. A request. A call for help. Maybe even an apology wrapped in protocol. I didn't need to read it. My answer had been clear from the moment I stepped out of that room. I had already moved on. Somewhere smaller, quieter, but better. Now when I walk into work, people look up. They nod. They ask how my weekend was. My input matters. My work doesn't vanish behind someone else's badge. There are no speeches, no parades, just mutual respect and a fresh cup of coffee. The letter stayed sealed. I tossed it in the drawer with a few other things I don't carry anymore. That chapter was closed. Not bitter, not angry, just finished. As I stepped outside into the late morning light, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Seen. Not for what I wore, not for who I reported to, but for what I carried and what I built. And that was more than enough.